Watch right now on the Front News Project. A shock for the Kremlin. Flamingo cruise missiles are already striking Russia in Moscow. A blackout is coming soon. Crimea is on fire. The largest oil depot. Russians are fleeing. The Ukrainian armed forces are taking back the peninsula. And more horror in the Russian army. The disposal of volunteers is in full swing. And this is just the beginning. Fiery, hot, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now. Greetings, this is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. Russia is in blackout. Moscow, get ready. The Ukrainian armed forces are launching an energy war against the aggressor country. Ukrainian drones and missiles are disabling thermal power plants deep behind enemy lines. What awaits Russians this winter if their dictator doesn't come to his senses and agree to peace talks on terms acceptable to Ukraine? More on this coming up.
8 airports closed fires from Tuapse to Nizhny Novgorod, 251 drones over 16 regions of Russia. From October 5th to 6th, Russia faced the largest Ukrainian drone attack in the past 6 months. A strike was carried out on the thermal power plant in Klintsy-Bryansk region. There, power outages began. And in Belgorod, there was a blackout. Part of the city was left without electricity for a long time, and this is not the first time.
And the city flickered.
Good morning, dear friends. As a result of the overnight work by our energy workers and emergency services, as of now, there is a partial outage in 24 settlements affecting 1,400 residents.
On the eve of winter and the heating season, Russia is once again routinely striking Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And now, for the first time in the 3.5 years of war, Kyiv is not only threatening retaliatory strikes, but is actually carrying them out.
If they threaten a blackout in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin should know there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia as well.
Any action by Russia aimed at harming Ukraine provokes a symmetrical response. This also applies to the energy sector.
The president was absolutely right in what he said. We will find both the means and the weapons, and we will carry out these operations. They will definitely realize that in this way, they will not gain any advantage. Any action by Russia will definitely be met with a counteraction. Andriy Inatov, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
Blackouts in Russian regions and even in Moscow are quite possible. And there are several reasons for this. One of them, of course, is the strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces on the power grid. And the second is the sanctions that are already in effect. And accordingly, the inability to purchase spare parts and equipment. And the existing ones are deteriorating and becoming unusable.
Russia's energy sector today is a powder keg. The capacity deficit reaches 25 gigawatts. This is not an isolated failure, but a systemic collapse. And this is even before any systematic strikes, which Russia itself is bringing closer by its actions against our energy sector. Instead of investing in its own thermal power plants and state district power stations, Moscow is losing reserves due to sanctions and aging equipment. Andrei Kovalenko, head of the Center for Policy Development.
If Ukraine starts systematically striking thermal power plants and state district power stations in all regions of the Russian Federation, as happened in the Belgorod region on the night from Sunday to Monday, it will be extremely difficult to restore Russia's energy sector. Currently, 42 regions of the Russian Federation are already imposing consumption restrictions during peak hours in the central part of the country. In Siberia and the Far East, there is an energy shortage everywhere. And this is even without any capacities being knocked out, while Russians are destroying Ukraine's energy sector. We have a safety net. We receive kilowatts from the EU as well as spare parts for restoration. In turn, the Russian Federation does not have such assistance. Their energy workers can only rely on themselves. And as the latest strike in the power sector showed, Russia is facing a very long, cold, and dark winter.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones attacked the largest oil depot in Crimea. As a result of the strike on the Feodosia oil terminal, a fuel storage tank exploded. A massive fire broke out, which can be seen from dozens of kilometers away. And the Russians have even bigger problems. Ukraine has begun using new Flamingo cruise missiles. This was reported by The Economist. Details about what is happening on the front line are in our military review.
New attacks on temporarily occupied Crimea. This time, explosions occurred near the Saki and Kacha airfields in Feodosia and Yevpatoria, as well as in the Simferopol district. As a result of the strike on the Feodosia oil terminal, a fuel tank exploded and a massive fire broke out, which could be seen from dozens of kilometers away.
This is primarily a blow to the logistics of the occupying army. This makes it impossible to redeploy personnel, to deliver ammunition, conduct rotations, and carry out other activities related to the logistics of the Russian occupying army. And secondly, it creates a fuel crisis in the territory of occupied Crimea. This also affects the social mood among the local population. In other words, this undermines trust in the actions of both the local occupying army and authorities, as well as, accordingly, the central government.
Belgorod region was hit by a blackout due to a strike by the Ukrainian armed forces. As a result of significant damage to the energy infrastructure, about 40,000 residents of Belgorod and the region were left without electricity. By the morning of October 6th, this number had dropped to 5,400 residents. On the night of October 6th, it was loud in Tuapse, Krasnodar Krai, and in Dzerzhinsk, Nizhny Novgorod region. In the city of Klinsy, Bryansk region, a large fire broke out at the local thermal power plant.
This facility is not only one of Russia's leading manufacturers of industrial explosives, but it also produces aerial bombs, specifically KABs, warheads for anti-tank guided missiles, and warheads for surface-to-air missile systems. This plant is on the sanctions list of the European Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, and Switzerland.
Ukraine has begun using FP5 Flamingo cruise missiles, which can fly as low as 50 meters above the ground, have a range of over 3,000 kilometers, and possess tremendous striking power thanks to a warhead weighing 1,150 kilograms, according to The Economist.
The missile cost about $500,000 US. For comparison, the American Tomahawk costs 4 times more than the Ukrainian Flamingo. How is the cost reduced? First and foremost is due to the use of refurbished turbofan engines from the Soviet era.
Manufacturing the carbon fiber fuselage takes only 6 hours. Currently, 2 to 3 FQ-5 missiles are produced per day. However, by the end of the month, this number is expected to increase to 7. Kramatorsk most likely attacked an enemy drone via fiber optic for the first time, reports a Radio Liberty correspondent.
Kramatorsk is a frontline city. The distance to the line of contact is about 20 kilometers. Therefore, accordingly, the use of FPV drones on fiber optic is a quite predictable scenario for the Russian Federation. All the more so since FPV drone strikes are one of the elements of terror against the civilian population. I would like to note that the information about the use of fiber optic, the drone on fiber optic, was also confirmed by the Kramatorsk City Council. But what is particularly telling is that this drone struck a passenger car that was parked near a multi-story residential building. In other words, this once again underscores that the Russian Federation has chosen a tactic of terror against the civilian population.
During the massive Russian missile and drone attack on Ukraine on October 5th, at least 3 Chinese reconnaissance satellites were detected over the Lviv region, which took the brunt of the strike, according to journalists from the publication Militarny. According to the official Chinese position, satellites of this type are used for scientific experiments, land resource research, and disaster prevention. However, it is also believed that these are military reconnaissance satellites. At the same time, it is noted that it is unknown whether these satellites were actually conducting reconnaissance during their flights over Ukraine. Putin is trying to curry favor with the United States so that they do not help Ukraine and in particular do not supply Tomahawk missiles. The Institute for the Study of War noted that Putin is working toward rapprochement between the US and Russia, trying in this way to achieve outcomes in Ukraine that are favorable for Moscow.
Well then, let's now analyze the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk direction of the front. The enemy army's bloody rampage continues here as well. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian invaders made 40 attempts to push back our defenders from their positions in the areas of the settlements of Nikonorivka, Mayak, Rodinske, Krasny Lyman, Razino, Novoekonomichna, Mirolyubivka, Lesivka, Pokrovsk, Zverevo, Kotlina, Udachne, and Orekovo. Filia and towards Novopavlivka and Vladimirovka. The defense forces are holding back the onslaught and have already repelled 35 enemy attacks. Another 5 combat engagements are still ongoing. The most massive combined strike on Lviv region since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Russia attacked the region with Shaheds and cruise missiles. One of the shells hit a residential house in the village of Lopaivka. An entire family was killed, 4 people in total. Among them was a 15-year-old girl. TSN correspondent Marichka Kuzik will tell and show you more about this horror.
All that remains of the house are bricks. It was completely demolished down to the foundation. This was a residential house in the village of Lopaivka, just outside Lviv. An entire family died here in an instant under the rubble. 3 adults and a 15-year-old girl. Rescuers managed to pull another family member out alive. And at the moment, he is in the hospital. 2 more residents of neighboring houses were also hospitalized.
Our units managed to save 4 people. We evacuated them from the upper floors and also had to pull people out from under the rubble where they ended up during this attack.
Last night, the Lviv region came under fire. It was the most powerful shelling since the beginning of the war. The Russians launched dozens of shaheds and missiles. Some were shot down by air defense forces, but several still made it through. Residents of the village that suffered the most say it was a night from hell.
We ran outside because we have hay on the roof. If shrapnel falls, what will happen? What will happen to us? We run out here and there's a rain of shrapnel falling. It was very loud and you know how terrifying that is. But all this time, I was prepared for it. I told my brother, it's just a matter of time. When could it hit here?
The blast wave moved on further. Dozens of houses with shattered windows, with destroyed roofs and doors. Since early morning, people have been taping up their windows with plastic to at least protect their homes a little.
All the windows are damaged and there are no front doors left at all. Here's a pile of doors. The guys, my nephews, are already starting to cover up some of the doorways for me. Look at what's happened to the ceilings and everything else.
For those who have nowhere to live, I've already put up 3 people from the Kharkiv region who were living here in a hotel. The rest have friends, relatives, and so on, so for now at least they haven't asked for help.
At the same time, the Russians struck both industrial and energy facilities in the region. In Lviv, warehouses, garages, a service station, and energy infrastructure facilities were damaged. An industrial park caught fire. This is a civilian facility with no military purpose. Debris also damaged a school and a kindergarten. Due to the heavy smoke, residents were asked not to open their windows and public transport only resumed operations in the morning. Debris from missile drones is still being found throughout the city and surrounding areas. People are being asked not to touch them and to immediately report them to the police.
And now it's time for an analysis of the operational situation on the Lyman front. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. On the Lyman front, Russian occupiers attempted to break through our defenses 4 times in the areas of the settlements of Horetka Dub, Myrna, and Shandri Hailov. 2 clashes are still ongoing.
Russian volunteers are tragically dying in Russia's ongoing and brutal war against Ukraine more frequently and in greater numbers than other categories of military personnel and occupiers. This alarming trend is clearly evidenced by comprehensive research data compiled from an extensive analysis of more than 134,000 Russian soldiers tragically killed at the front lines. This raises a critical question. Who among the ranks of Putin's vast army truly has the best and most realistic chance of safely returning home from this devastating conflict? And which Russian soldiers are most likely not to be lucky enough to live longer? More on this ahead.
No one will help you here. Crawl after the guy in the underwear. It turns out they kept sending us to assault the whole time, telling us to go for the stronghold. I don't have a leg anymore.
From September 19th to October 3rd alone, the Russian army irretrievably lost more than 1,000 people in the war in Ukraine.
There's absolutely nowhere to take a refreshing bath. I don't know if I'll truly make it out of this situation. I'm crawling for about 20 long kilometers and my head is constantly spinning.
The losses of the Russian Federation are horrifying. The economy is bursting at the seams, but Putin is ready to make even greater sacrifices. Now even businesses are being harshly required to help recruit people for the front.
Now it has actually become significantly easier to simply give up, to do what really will not work. He knows perhaps more than anyone that people do understand us and
instead just to stand up and firmly.
Independent journalists using open sources have identified the names of 134,125 Russian soldiers who have died since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This data makes it possible to track a kind of pulse of the war when the Kremlin spared no one and threw its people into local assaults for the sake of capturing yet another village in Ukraine.
Our commanders are making inadequate decisions, sending us to certain death. There are just so many different civilian drones out there. PLV and Baba Yaga are coming. All the mortars and barrels, the artillery, are firing. And there's no cover at all. They're just sending us out in the open. And now the guys are digging their own graves.
For the first year and a half, the casualty graph looked like a roller coaster. That was when Russian troops were storming Bakhmut and Avdiivka. The Russian Ministry of Defense, then still headed by Shoigu, was burying 100 to 150 people a day. Sometimes the numbers would drop to 50 or 60 killed per day. Since October 2023, the curve has remained consistently high. It drops below 120 only in rare cases, and the recent dips on the graph are not due to any miraculous rescue of Russian troops, but rather the time needed to verify and process fresh obituaries.
Our guys went through hell in captivity. The dead suffered numerous tortures and abuses. Most have shrapnel wounds and concussions, fractures that healed without any medical intervention. One of them is missing a leg. They all need medical care, a military medical commission, and ultimately leave. But instead, these sick men are being sent to the front lines.
In terms of geography, Bashkortostan and Tatarstan lead in the number of their citizens killed in the war. Here, local volunteers help identify the dead.
Our city, right? Miski. In 15 years of the war in Afghanistan, there were only 3 or 4 people killed. And just look at what's happening now. Everything is just covered in flags.
There's a special category, volunteers, those who signed a contract in 2022. Right now, they make up almost a third of all identified casualties. That's 29%. Can you imagine? That's just one country. That's a factory. In just 2 years. Now there are new burials appearing. The Kremlin is disposing of those who went to war on their own, who fell for the propaganda. Prisoners make up the second largest category of losses. That's 14%. Some of the dead are officially recorded as volunteers, not as convicts.
There are many individuals today who are currently in various places of confinement, and they deeply love their homeland, their native country. They have a good chance to prove it by signing a contract for the special mission.
Mobilized soldiers make up 11% of the list. This figure is understated because obituaries often conceal their status.
In short, it's truly, essentially,
one of the most significant categories of losses are Russian officers who deliberately went to kill Ukrainians for the sake of medals on their chests. Journalists have counted 5,847 dead, and these are already with exact names. Among them are 150 colonels and as many as 12 generals.
We lived our lives. We didn't worry about a thing. We rejoiced in our happiness. We grieved deeply in our sorrow. And then, quite suddenly, bang, and all the young guys went off to tragically die.
For the Russian army, this is a painful blow because their entire system relies on officers. They coordinate the interaction between different units and accordingly give criminal orders for strikes on Ukraine. So, what are the real numbers?
Actually, it was our Putin who got involved in this war. How many people have died?
So then? What is visible from open sources covers only 45 to 65% of the actual losses. That is, the list, 134,000, is just the tip of the iceberg, which Putin is doing everything he can to hide. Currently, Ukraine counts more than 1,100,000 losses. This list includes both wounded and missing Russian occupiers. Even the so-called occupied LDNR stopped publishing data on their losses since December 2022. In reality, according to BBC and Mediazona, the number could be more than 300,000 Russian soldiers killed. And that's not counting the bodies that still remain on the battlefield. The number is staggering.
The flags are hanging. In short, there are a lot of dead, guys. It's going to be countless. I feel like by the time we learn the whole truth about their numbers, the entire country will already be dreaming.
The Russian army, which has already lost hundreds of thousands of people, continues to fight. So-called volunteers from EKI are making up for the shortage in personnel. Officers are dying faster than they can be trained. And now death statistics have become the main indicator of the success of the world's second army.
And now, an analysis of the situation on the Kramatorsk and Toretsk fronts. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. On the Kramatorsk front, the enemy attacked our defenders' positions once, advancing toward the settlement of Stopochki. On the Toretsk front, however, the enemy carried out 14 assault actions in the areas of Rusinova Yara, Katerinivka, Shcherbinivka, and Pleshchiyivka. Right now, fighting is taking place in 3 locations. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has plunged into a blackout which could lead to a major accident. And at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, due to the actions of Russian occupiers who sent drones there, the arch protecting the 4th destroyed reactor was left without power. We present to your attention the details of yet another atrocity committed by the Russian invaders.
The Ministry of Energy of Ukraine does not rule out the possibility of a nuclear and radiological accident at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is located in the Russian-occupied city of Enerhodar. The ministry made this statement in response to an inquiry from the Radio Liberty Project. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is the largest nuclear facility in Europe and the 3rd largest in the world in terms of total capacity. Before the full-scale Russian invasion, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was supplied by 10 overhead power lines. Due to shelling by the occupiers, by 2025 only 2 of them remained operational. One of them stopped working at the beginning of May. And on September 23rd, the last one connecting the plant to the Ukrainian power grid was disconnected.
As a result, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is now operating on backup diesel generators. The authorities describe this mode of operation as unprecedented, since the plant's design did not provide for the long-term functioning of safety systems solely on diesel generators. Accordingly, there is no reliable data on the guaranteed duration of their uninterrupted operation or on their reliability indicators under such a load. The situation is further complicated by the gradual degradation of equipment as well as the inability to carry out necessary scheduled maintenance and regulatory work. This significantly increases the risk of diesel generator failure and consequently creates a threat of shutdown of the nuclear fuel cooling systems and disconnection of critically important safety systems, which could lead to a nuclear and radiological accident.
Earlier, President Zelensky also spoke about the unprecedented danger looming not only over Ukraine.
The plant was not designed for this and has never operated in such a mode for so long, and we already have information that one of the generators has broken down. And it is precisely the Russians, because of their shelling, who are preventing the repair of the power lines and the restoration of basic safety. And this is a threat to everyone. No tourist in the world has ever dared to do to a nuclear power plant what Russia is doing now, and it is right that the world does not remain silent.
Even the IAEA called the situation threatening, by the way, on the 3rd day after the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was left without power supply. The Director General of the agency, Rafael Grossi, flew to Moscow to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Russian nuclear industry. At that time, the official met not only with the director of Roscosmos, but also with Putin himself, and in the end gave a completely optimistic response. He said that he had an important exchange of views with the dictator regarding nuclear safety. But as we can see, the tension around the largest nuclear facility in Europe has not subsided. The European
Union is now calling for the withdrawal of the ASC, equipment, and all unauthorized personnel from the territory of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and for it to be returned to Ukrainian control. It is impossible for such a massive system to be managed by realists. Attention needs to be paid not only by Europeans now, but also by Trump. Attention should also be paid to Xi Jinping as well as Modi. Putin has already set his sights on Modi. It must be said, friends, that you are supporting a nuclear terrorist. This is the only terrorist in the world who has nuclear weapons. In this case, you are all terrorists, because if it goes off, it will affect the entire planet. And Chernobyl will seem like a cherry on top of the cake to you.
While a ticking time bomb from Russian aggression is maturing in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is also suffering. For the second time this year, an emergency has occurred due to attacks by the Russian army. As a result, the shelling near the town of Slavutich led to the disconnection of the sarcophagus built over the destroyed 4th power unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant from the power supply. emergency services managed to resolve the problem fairly quickly. But as we can see, the Russians are increasingly walking on the edge with their nuclear terrorism.
Well then, now we will analyze the situation on the Novopavlovsk front, where Putin's army is as usual acting in its typical manner. On the Novopavlovsk direction, the aggressor tried to break through the defenses of our defenders in the areas of the settlements of Zelenigay, Alta, Podobnaya, Voskresenka, Sechnevoi, Sosnovka, Voronoe, and Novogrigorievka. Our soldiers repelled 12 enemy assaults and 4 more attacks are still ongoing. Yes, the intensity of fighting in the Porozhsk region is increasing. The enemy is deploying assault troops, heavy equipment, and aviation. They are attacking the Rabotino salient both from the east, from Novopokrovka towards Malatokmachka, and from the west, from Nesteryanka towards Novodanilivka. A report from the Porozhsk front line by TSN correspondent Ruslan Ermaluk, coming to your attention right now. A couple of tons. Sometimes it's a couple of tons, 2 or 3 tons, it all depends on how much we work.
This guy carries 2 tons of shells by hand in a single day. His name is Vitaly, he's from Volyn, and he's the father of 3 children. A real machine.
I could have stayed away, but my brother is here, so I'm here too.
Almost everyone in this crew is a volunteer who has been fighting since 2022 or 2023. Most of them started out in the infantry and now, after training, they're gunners. Myself in 2022.
The year it all started. I'm not a soldier and never served, but we went in on pure enthusiasm.
Because of the large number of enemy drones in the air, the vehicle is dug in, camouflaged, and covered with nets.
In the 2023,
there wasn't this kind of intensity or variety of birds. Drones started appearing up front in 24, let's say, in large numbers. And to this day, there are more and more of them.
Near the gun, Lemon stands guard with a shotgun. 10 per magazine.
10 rounds in each mag, and I've got 2 mags with me. But if needed, I can fire off all 10 at once. Whatever flies in, that's what we shoot down.
The enemy, even though they're careful, tries to advance every day. They don't go on foot, they come on bikes or motorcycles. And it's like this every day. And sometimes there are big offensives with tanks and APCs. That's when the gun barrels get red hot from firing. To the max.
At their peak, the guys even fired over 100 rounds in one shift. That is, in a day and a half, sometimes 2 days, it happened. Yeah, sometimes it was 20 or 30 rounds too. It all depends on the intensity, on how hard the enemy pushes into our land and our positions.
Right now, they're firing high explosive shells at infantry. The self-propelled gun is aimed at the target, and the shells fly across the steppe and into the groves.
We work with precision. That is, we try not to give away our position as much as possible, because there are a lot of drones in the air, they're watching, and counter-battery fire could come in. So we try to be more precise, and when needed, many of our FPV drone pilots work on dropping munitions, and we support them.
The gun fires, the camouflage nets drop, and the vehicle hides. Somewhere out in the field, the first explosions of enemy artillery shells are already going off, blending with the roar of air bomb detonations.
They're bringing in aviation.
They use aviation every day. You can even more or less set your watch by them, because they mostly operate in the evening hours. So yes, they launch 5, 6, or even more almost every day. Not almost every day, but literally every day. Yes, they keep working with KABs.
Here they became who they are now, warriors.
That's all for today. But very soon on Front News, there will be new, unique reports from our journalists at the hottest spots of the war, all so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Kimoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.